You know what a carnivore is. You know what an herbivore or an omnivore is. But would I stump you if I asked, what's a Nutrivore? I'm Colleen, a PA, dietitian, and your nutrition mentor. Welcome to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. Nutrivore, a noun, a person who chooses foods to supply all the nutrients their body needs to thrive. A way of eating built around nutrient-dense whole foods, not restriction. Now, when I first heard about the book Nutrivore, I immediately knew I wanted to speak to the author because so much of what I try to teach patients aligns with the core message of this book. Nutrivore isn't a diet book. It's a completely new way to think about food. Instead of labeling food as good or bad, Nutrivore teaches us to zoom out and look at the overall quality of the diet, choosing foods that, over the course of the day, provides the essential vitamins and minerals our bodies need to thrive. So today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, the New York Times bestselling author and the creator of Nutrivore. In this episode, you'll learn how to explain nutrient density to a patient in 60 seconds, using a car analogy that your patients will love. You'll learn what to say when a patient tells you that they don't like any vegetables or says that healthy eating is too expensive, and why the old eat less, move more approach to weight loss is really outdated and potentially harmful. This episode is a powerful reminder that small, doable changes, like adding just one serving of vegetables a day, can move the needle on your patient's health in really big ways. Now, before we dive in, I wanted to let you know that I'll be taking a short break from the podcast as I help my daughter get ready and settled into the new school year and work on a few projects that have upcoming deadlines. But don't worry, I'll be back with new episodes on September 3rd. Now, in the meantime, please let's stay connected on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can find me at Exam Room Nutrition. Give me a follow and send me a message letting me know that you are a podcast listener. And don't forget to browse the podcast archives. Over the past 2 years, I've covered a ton of nutrition topics that I'm sure you'll find super helpful and inspiring. All right, now get comfy or drive safe and enjoy my conversation with Dr. Sarah. Dr. Ballantyne, one of the things I love about your approach is how aligned it is with what we're trying to do here on this podcast, which is to help patients nourish their bodies without any shame or restriction. And you focus on nutrient density, not perfection. And that's such a refreshing take. And I'm really, really excited to dig into how we can bring that into the exam room. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, your dietary philosophy is focused on nutrient density. And I want to start there. So my first question is, how do we explain that concept of nutrient density to our patients and why should they care about that?
I think it's a really challenging concept to communicate in a very short period of time because it really goes against the grain of how, like, all of the messages that we're inundated with all the time from diet culture, which is almost like that if you think of the tug and pull between teaching patients about nutrition from an evidence-based perspective versus all of the things that they're reading online. So I think the most important message to give in a short period of time is nutrients are raw materials. Your body needs nutrients the way a car needs gas, but also oil and brake fluid and windshield wiper fluid. So we've got this big collection of things that our bodies need to do all of the things that our bodies do in a healthy way. And that's what vitamins are. That's what minerals are. And so we want to look at when we're choosing foods, not just look at the energy, not just look at the gas that food gives us, but does it have the brake fluid? Does it have oil? Does it have windshield wiper fluid? All of the other things that the engine needs to run smoothly. That's what nutrients like vitamins and minerals are. So when we're choosing food, the best way to understand food is by understanding nutrient density, how much of those other things the engine of the body needs to run for the amount of gas that we're putting into it. So it's how much of these other important things for the energy. And if we can kind of do, there's lots of other analogies we can go with. I like the car engine analogy because you can really see how quickly an engine can break down if you're not putting oil into it, but you are still putting in lots of gas, right? Gas is the calories. Everything else the engine needs is all of the other nutrients. We're not taught that in school, right? Most people don't have a sense of what nutrients actually are, right? They're raw materials, they're building blocks. They're what you are made of, and they're what your body burns through every single day, not just energy, but it uses up those raw materials to do all of the things that your body does, like your heart beating, like breathing, like your immune system fighting off an infection.
I love that analogy, and I'm a huge fan of analogies because I think it takes complex things and just simplifies it, especially for patients, so they can really understand it. And you're so right. We are in this diet culture that we're so hyper-focused on macronutrients and did you get your macros and protein, that we are missing the mark with a lot of those micronutrients. And you actually share in your book that 90% of people don't get enough of at least 4 essential nutrients, which really doesn't surprise me, given the fact that so few people actually eat enough like fruits and vegetables and plants in general. And so why is nutrient deficiency so common, even among people who think they're, quote, eating healthy?
Yeah, there's multiple contributors to this. I mean, as health is always so complex, so are the human behaviors that go into health. So one is the accessibility, affordability, and palatability of ultra-processed foods that tend to have a lot less essential nutrients per calorie. So they're more affordable, they are shelf stable, they're easier to prepare, and they're addictively delicious, right? And they're cheaper. All of the food supply is kind of stacked against our attempts to get enough nutrients. Whole foods take longer to prepare, they're more expensive, and they don't taste as good. So that is like a major, major barrier. I think another one is lack of education. So whether you're learning about nutrition in your 1 week section of your health class in high school, or you're learning about nutrition by reading through the USDA dietary guidelines for Americans, which only about 8% of Americans are actually trying to follow, or more likely, you're learning about nutrition from your favorite diet guru or wellness influencer online. None of those entities are teaching you about nutrients. None of them are teaching you what nutrients do in the body and what foods have what nutrients, right? Where are you going to get those nutrients? And so because we don't have an understanding of the difference between vitamin C and, vitamin E and how those are used differently in the body, because we don't know that potassium and sodium work together in this like amazing synergistic way, but you need to have them in balance. We don't have that information. So if we don't have that information, how can we make decisions based on it? So we get conflicting messages from a diet culture, typically focused on what to restrict, not what to add, right? We don't know what foods are valuable and why. And the most nutritionally valuable foods are the least accessible and affordable. So it's kind of this like perfect storm of a challenge to overcome.
And we're going to get into some of those tips on how to help patients actually add these nutritious foods into their diet in a little bit. But I wanted to dig into something that you unpack in your book. And you talk about 12 nutritionally distinct food families. So I'd love if you could just briefly explain what those are.
Yeah. So I definitely think this is a next level concept when it comes to improving diet quality. So this isn't exactly where I would start. I would probably start by actually just distilling it to 5 foods to add. And I would say those are vegetables, fruit, legumes, seafood, and nuts and seeds. When we're adding those, not to say that's what our diet is based on, just those are the foods that we want to be conscientious to try to get more of throughout the day when we're talking about fruits and vegetables, throughout the week when we're talking about legumes, seafood, and nuts and seeds. These are foods that fill the most common nutritional gaps, right? So they're foods that have a lot of the nutrients that we are the most likely to be falling short of, because they are the foods that on average Americans are under eating the most, even though these are foods that have the strongest health effects over the long run. So we can get into more nitty gritty of like vegetable families and fruit families to add. But I think that especially in the interest of helping somebody make that first step successfully, so they're building off of success and they are approaching diet through the lens of eating patterns, right? Lifelong healthy habits. I think that simplifying it to try to eat more vegetables. Fruit is not candy. You don't need to earn fruit. Fruit is just fine. Try to get a couple servings of seafood in per week. Try to eat more legumes, whether that's a starchy food or a protein food. More legumes is going to be great either way. And try to get, a handful of nuts and seeds at least a few times per week. I think if we can simplify those foods to add to that shorter list, that's an easier first starting point compared to what I think of as the once we've got that mastered, then we can add in the layer of 12 Nutrivore foundational foods, which just breaks down fruit and vegetable families a little bit more granularly to make sure that we're getting that full range of phytonutrients that are so important.
I love that. And you've got to keep it simple for your patients, right? If you overwhelm them with here's 12 other things you've got to add in, and it might be foods that they've never even heard of before, it's super overwhelming. So I really like that simplistic approach and starting kind of high level before you get into the details with your patients. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here and ask a follow-up question that patients might be saying to their provider who's telling them to eat more fruits and vegetables, and that is that it's too expensive. So how would we respond to a patient who says that?
So sometimes it is just too expensive, right? There are going to be people for whom fruits and vegetables are just not in the budget, in which case we say do the best you can. So if it's 1 or 2 servings, every little bit counts. And one of the most toxic messages from diet culture is that if you're not perfect, right, and then it's meaningless. That's not what the science says. The science says every better choice adds up. But there's lots of ways that we can get more fruits and vegetables on a budget. The first is to know that there's no benefit to organic fruits and vegetables compared to conventional. So you do not have to pay that premium price for organic fruits and vegetables, even from the Dirty Dozen list. There is no nutritional difference with frozen vegetables. They are just as nutritious as fresh vegetables. And the same is true for canned. So you can get canned green beans, right? Canned mushrooms, canned corn, canned peas, or frozen of all of those. Often that you can find really affordable frozen vegetables in the discount section in the grocery store. Store brand is just as good as name brand. So if you want to load up on the Great Value brand frozen broccoli, which is extremely affordable as a vegetable, that's a great way to get our vegetables in. And so we can lean into frozen options. We can lean into canned options. No name brand is fine or store brand is fine. We don't need organic. And it's okay to also lean into those fruits and vegetables that are so budget friendly that they're actually budget stretching foods. So think of bulk bags of carrots. At my local grocery store, cabbage is typically really cheap. Potatoes and sweet potatoes tend to be really cheap. And then the frozen mixed vegetables, frozen peas, frozen corn, frozen broccoli tend to be really affordable. Leaning into those options that are extremely budget friendly and getting our diversity in our diet elsewhere can be a great strategy for getting in more fruits and vegetables on a budget. And then there's other cool things like, finding a community garden. Often those are free, especially for certain income thresholds. Then you can have a little gardening space and then learning from other gardeners in your area. What are the vegetables that are the easiest to grow that will give you the most food in a small amount of time and space? That can be another way to get more fruits and vegetables in a really affordable way.
Yes, I love those. Okay. My next example of a patient pushback from this suggestion is those who say that they don't like any of those. So how can we help our really selective eaters add variety without feeling like they either have to eat stuff they don't like or that it just doesn't feel so overwhelming?
So my first suggestion is to ask, what do you like? Is there any option that you do like? And is there something similar enough, right, that you can branch out, but it still feels familiar? Is there a sauce that you like or a dressing, right? So you get the same benefit from eating Brussels sprouts if you eat them boiled soggy versus roasted with a oil and salt or your favorite seasoning blend versus roasted and with some cheese sauce or served with your favorite ranch dressing. Are you a ketchup kid in a grown-up body, right? Is there a way that you can add a flavor to these foods to make them enjoyable to you? Again, one of the toxic messages from diet culture is it doesn't count if you're enjoying it. And they kind of teach us, right, salad dressing is bad, right? Sauces are terrible. But no, they can be really amazing tools for making healthier foods more palatable to us and cater to our flavor preferences. And we shouldn't feel bad about needing to add, some kind of, sauce or dressing to our vegetables to make it tastier. In fact, we should see that as a win because we're eating those vegetables.
Love that point right there. And I actually talk about that a lot with my pediatric patients. And I make suggestions of like, hey, can you, have Nutella with a banana, or maybe let them have some Nutella with strawberries just to get them excited about eating it. And the parents are actually really shocked that I suggested Nutella, and they say, oh, isn't that a lot of sugar? And isn't that bad? Okay, yeah, it does have some sugar, but guess what? It doesn't take any of the nutrition away from that fruit that they're now consuming that they otherwise would not have. So I love that point about sauces. And I think we should really utilize that to help patients learn to enjoy fruits and vegetables more.
Yep. I think the other thing that's really helpful for people to know is that familiarity is a part of how we develop food preference. So you might not like that fruit or vegetable right now because you haven't had it very many times, but the more you expose yourself to it, just like you might have a 1-bite rule in your family with your kid, we can kind of have the same sort of rules for ourselves of like, just try it. And positive association is also a really important part of developing food preference. This is why adding sauces and dressings help, because you're adding a flavor you really like to something that you're developing a preference for. But you can also leverage positive associations with other foods you're serving at the meal. So let's say you don't like Brussels sprouts, but you love steak. Maybe you always make Brussels sprouts when you have steak, right? So you're starting to associate one of your favorite foods with a food you're developing a preference for. But positive associations can also be, we laughed really hard at the dinner table because we were all trying to think of the dumbest puns we could possibly think of. And that was a really fun game. Or I was watching my favorite TV show and I saved that meal where I'm developing our preference for something for the day of the week that I watched that I have dinner in front of my favorite show, right? So we can also leverage positive associations in our environment to help us develop preferences, and just kind of like practice makes perfect, right? Like keep trying, because the familiarity is a really important aspect, right? When you know what to expect, and then trying different recipes. Maybe you just haven't found the way of cooking Brussels sprouts that is the way that you like yet.
Yeah. I mean, the psychology of behavior change is fascinating and really, really important when it comes to learning to like new foods, especially fruits and veggies. So I think that's really fascinating, is having something positive associated with that food you're trying to like more of. So I love that point. So I want to move into a little bit of a bigger concept in, the last couple of minutes that we have, but I would love your thoughts on, when we tell patients, just eat less and move more because they're wanting to lose weight. We know that the science of metabolism is way more complex than that. So I'd be really interested to hear kind of your ideas and your philosophy on the key factors that do influence weight beyond just calories in and calories out.
I mean, it's so phenomenally complex. So we have other behaviors, right, that influence weight by influencing our hormone environment. So when we're stressed, that, increases our appetite, increases our cravings, makes us more disinhibited around food. So we're more likely to, I'll just have 1 bite and then it's the whole cake. Eating distracted is more likely to have us eat more. Not getting enough sleep also increases appetite, increases cravings, makes us more disinhibited. We're even more likely to buy more calories for the same budget in the grocery store if we go grocery shopping when we're tired. Too high of an energy deficit increases hunger, increases food fixation and obsession, makes us more tired. And actually, one of the things that happens is we lower our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is all of the calories we burn throughout the day, not exercising, but doing everything else that's movement. And so one of the things that happens when you have too high of an energy deficit, right? So you're trying to cut 500 calories a day or 1,000 calories a day. You're doing these really ridiculous 1,200 calorie a day diet. 1,200 calories is not appropriate for any adult. That it is too low. That is way too drastic of a calorie deficit. So what happens is you get hungry over time because your hunger hormone ghrelin increases and it's not as suppressed as much when you eat. So you find meals are less filling and you're hungrier between meals. But then you also, through conservation of energy, because our body thinks it's a famine and we're trying to survive, things will happen like you'll walk past like the kids' toys on the floor, and where you normally would have walked past them and just like bent over and scooped them up and thrown them in the toy basket, you'll just kind of go, no, I'll do that later. right? You actually lose motivation to do these small little movement tasks throughout the day. And it can look like, in a lot of cases, right, that starts to look like depression. It starts to look like I just can't be bothered. And that is a psychological adaptation to a too high calorie deficit. And then when you add deprivation and a restriction and that mindset of, but I can't have, those foods are bad. I'm a bad person if I eat those bad foods. Now you are adding this whole other layer that is actually dramatically increasing the likelihood of developing disordered eating patterns and yo-yo dieting, right? Weight cycling. And so part of understanding weight goals has to be focused on habit formation side, right? So like, let's work on the healthy habits that will help normalize your body weight to a metabolically healthy weight for you. And that will make you healthier, whether or not you lose weight, rather than just getting back on this, like the same old, gerbil wheel, right? Where we feel like we're white knuckling our diets for as long as we can hold on. And then the first time there's something really stressful or busy, and things don't go exactly according to plan in our lives, we're off that diet. And now we don't feel like we have control. And that's what conventional diets do to us. They are designed to fail, but to make us think that it was our fault, right? That is how diets are designed, because that's how we buy the next diet program. So being able to see the complexity of things that are impacting weight, right? Health conditions are also going to impact weight, right? So, thyroid function, great thing to test in a patient who is struggling to lose weight, right? So there's also make sure we don't have an underlying pathology that needs to be addressed. But looking at, our diet culture has taught us so many wrong things about how to approach weight loss. And it is what is fueling the entire, $250 billion a year diet and weight loss industry. Those diets are designed to be non-sustainable so that we will continue to be customers. And so if we can disengage from that and really focus on the habits, focus on the eating patterns, get enough sleep, get some moderate activity, right? That just a daily walk can do wonders for appetite regulation and for reducing cravings. So fitting that in, slow and steady wins the race. No giant energy deficits, and really approach it from more of a habit-centered mindset. I think that is where we can get healthy, maintainable weight loss.
Oh my gosh, you've already shared so many excellent pieces of advice, but if a provider only had time to recommend one tiny nutrition change to improve the patient's nutrient intake, what would you suggest?
I guess in this scenario, we don't necessarily have a starting point, right? We haven't had enough time. We've got a five minutes in an exam room with a patient. We don't really know what their starting point is. I always have a different starting point for different people, but adding a serving of vegetables is kind of never gonna be the wrong answer here. So can you add a serving of vegetables at dinner? Can you add a salad to your drive-through order for lunch, right? Is there a way of adding one more serving of vegetables? So if you've got somebody who's not eating any vegetables, going from 0 to 1 decreases all-cause mortality about the same magnitude as going from 1 to 4. So that's gonna be a big difference. And we know on average, right? On average, Americans are eating a little over 1.5 servings of vegetables per day. So probably that's going to be a big difference, right? You're probably talking to somebody who's not eating very many vegetables. And I think that from trying to eat more vegetables, you can actually build a lot more really good habits from that. And I think one of the things that's really powerful about that being your 30 seconds of diet advice is its addition. And I think most people think about diets by subtraction. So when we focus on addition, we also start to change that mindset towards one that's more in tune with sustainable habit change. So I would say that's probably going to be my go-to, right? You could also say more whole foods, but then I think that can be often misinterpreted as it has to all be fresh and expensive. I have to shop at Whole Foods, right? That can actually, I think, sometimes feed into diet culture messages. Whereas it's just say, vegetables are really important. Can you add one serving of veggies per day? That can make a big difference. Most of the time, you're going to be talking to someone for whom that really is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of diet changes that they can make.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I love that piece of advice. We have barely scratched the surface of the content and the information that is in your book, Nutrivore. So I would love for you to share with my audience where they can connect with you and purchase their book if they're interested.
Yeah, so my book is called Nutrivore. It's available wherever books are sold. It's definitely most discounted on Amazon, but of course, I'm a big fan of supporting local independent bookstores, and it might be at your local library as well. My website is Nutrivore.com, and I have really in-depth articles to learn about nutrients and all the health conditions that they're associated with. So you can go and you can learn about, like, there's 20 different health conditions that not enough dietary vitamin C increases the risk of. And I think especially for practitioners, that's a really great place to start deepening your knowledge about the link between nutrition and health challenges, so that if you have a patient with a specific cluster of diagnoses, you can start thinking about the nutrients that might be supportive, along with whatever other, treatment protocols are obvious to recommend or prescribe. And you can find me on social media at Dr. Sarah Ballantyne across most platforms.
Dr. Sarah, your content is so valuable. It's so helpful. So I will link to all of that down below if you guys want to get connected with Dr. Sarah and get so much value from all of her amazing resources. Thank you so very much for the gift of your time. I know you're so busy, so I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you again for having me.
Well, I hope this episode gave you a new lens to view nutrition through, one that's focused on adding value, not restriction. Now, if you're wanting more ways to help patients in their health journey, I would love to invite you to join the Obesity Medicine Nutrition course. It's an on-demand CE-accredited course that gives you 10.5 credits, lifetime access to a growing community of like-minded providers, and tons of bonus resources. One of the members, Jayza, said, "It's one of the best investments I've made. I'm a new dietitian and new to private practice, so I was apprehensive about spending the money, but I think it's worth its weight in gold." Thank you, Jayza. So head over to examroomnutrition.com/course and use code POD15 to save 15% off the entire course. This is my way of thanking you for being a loyal podcast listener. Now, if you learned something that you can use in clinic this week, do me a quick favor, leave me a short review in your podcast app. This helps other clinicians like you find my show. Well, thanks for carving out time for nutrition today. As always, let's continue to make our patients healthier, one exam room at a time. I'll see you next month.